Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO and COO of Treasury Careers. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today on Modern CFO's Priority, Unlocking the Strategic Value of Accounts Payable. I would like to thank our webinar partner, Use. Use brings intelligence to AP automation. Use offers a cloud-based end-to-end AP automation solution empowering SMEs to streamline their workflow in order to save time and money. And their strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Accounts payable has been undergoing a paradigm shift from a back office afterthought to a core strategic business function. Today, you'll learn how to leverage technology to unlock the strategic value of accounts payable at your companies. I will share with you today how companies of all sizes are realizing lower invoice processing costs, mitigating payments risk exposures, and improving supplier relationships through AP automation. I'll also share how to define the ROI to your company in automating the accounts payable function and how to deliver and develop an effective business case for investing in AP automation. Before I delve into our content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and review our learning objectives as they offer our value proposition to you in attending our webinar today. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. We have Treasury job opportunities through our parent company, treasuryjobs.com. We have a vast array of Treasury certification resources, complimentary webinars like this one today. We have our past webinars, on-demand webinars. We have a lot of Treasury best practices resources. And yes, stay tuned for even more. A new Treasury certification is on the way. Now to our exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll also send you links via email to the presentation slides and the webinar recording over the next 24 hours. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all the polling questions and remain on the line for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions on CTP credit, please send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We want to hear from you, so please ask your questions at any time in the Q&A section of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to your questions as they come up or at the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey today at the end of the webinar, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for our valuable time. So what are our learning objectives today? I'd like you to understand why accounts payable is a key strategic function. I'd like you to be able to identify opportunities to improve the value of the accounts payable function at your company. I'd like you to be able to quantify how improvements in AP can improve supplier relationships, impact productivity across your company, and impact your company's bottom line. And I'd like you to be able to construct and communicate an effective business case for AP automation at your company. One learning objective that I specifically have. Another one is I want you to take an action from today's webinar. I want you to take someone from AP out to lunch, take your CFO out to lunch, start a conversation about AP automation, engage those at your company who are involved in the AP function. So the real value to this webinar for you is going to be to take that action and to get some knowledge to help your company on your journey to a world-class accounts payable function. So how are we going to accomplish our objectives today? We're going to talk about why accounts payable now matters to CFOs. What are the driving forces that we see? And I think this is only going to continue as we go on and on. And then we're going to talk about automation, how it's the cure for AP headaches, and we're going to talk about several sources. We're going to review some research, and we're going to also give you some great resources on how to benchmark the cost of processing an invoice at your company. This is an inherent barrier that many companies face. Some companies don't have the information to even say how much it costs them to process an invoice, and that's really the starting point for improving the accounts payable function. We'll talk about the strategic outcomes of AP automation and that ROI. We'll talk about how to build that business case, and then we'll offer some closing thoughts and resources. So we're going to go ahead and do a little level set here and make this a little bit of an interactive experience for you. So we're going to go ahead and launch our first polling question. Ask you to share with us which of the following is your management team, or if you're the CFO, what are you most concerned about with relation to accounts payable? Just a reminder, those of you who are interested in CTP credit for today's webinar, we need you to answer all the questions. Of course, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all the polling questions, and this will really do a good job of level setting on the audience for me, and I'll also compare this to the results that we see later on in various research studies that we're going to look at. Also, I'm going to take this opportunity and many others throughout the webinar to remind you that I can take your questions at any time during the webinar in your GoToWebinar control panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question here in about the next 5 seconds. Then I'm going to go ahead and share the survey results with you and give you my initial reaction, and then we'll get back to our compelling content and we'll talk about the evolution of accounts payable and why it's becoming more of a laser focus for CFOs at companies of all sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go ahead and share the results here. So it's pretty even about what I expected. So we've got reducing the money spent on the invoice processing and reducing the time it takes to process invoices. So obviously those go hand in hand. But like I said, what's going to be interesting is when we look at some of the survey results, a couple of things. One will be how many companies really don't have a good idea of what that costs. The other thing will be just how much it costs in the sources. So for me, as I get more and more into the weeds of the accounts payable process, and it's amazing to me how many people, processes, and systems are involved in that accounts payable process. And from that CFO perspective, of course, we want to lower costs. But two other areas of AP automation which are critical in making the business case are impacting productivity across the enterprise. So you can empower your AP staff to focus on more strategic activities. They don't need to spend time on the phone resolving issues. They don't need to spend time keying in invoices. So that productivity there. And the other side of that is also improving supplier relationships. So I used to work in manufacturing, and when I worked in manufacturing, the value of our suppliers, our top suppliers, was just important as the relationships with our customers. So being able to get that visibility into those supplier relationships and also being able to optimize the use of our cash, see those discounts, and also create opportunities to take those discounts are really going to move us to more of that strategic value. And that's what's really starting to speak to CFOs at companies of all sizes. So I like this graphic from Ardent Partners, the State of ePayables 2016. What you'll see on the slides are hyperlinks, sources of data and information. I encourage you to look at this research after the webinar is over. It's really fascinating, and it also in some cases gives you the ability to benchmark on where you're at and see where you're going, and also take a look at some of the struggles and pains and also some of the successes of other companies. But even when I worked in Treasury back in the early 90s, AP was really a back office function. But then as we started to go through the 90s, early 2000s, that's a point of collaboration. And I'd say just in the last 2 or 3 years, what we've seen is we're getting to the point where it's a true intelligence hub, maximizing those supplier relationships. So I think we're going to continue to see that evolution here. We're going to see that strategic value, and more attention and investment is going to be paid to accounts payable, and rightly so. And here is an interesting graph from Ardent Partners, the State of ePayables in 2017, that really shows, I think, how far we've come. So just a few demographics about the survey. They had almost 200 responses. 68% of the people that took the survey had accounts payable titles. Another 18% had finance and treasury. The company size was really tilted towards the large middle market, and then really on the low end of the enterprise companies. So 61% of the companies responding had over $1 billion in revenue, and 25% were $250 to $1 billion. So I'm very happy to see that we have 45% very valuable, highly involved in financial operations. I think we'll see that number continue to go up. And it's good to see that this number, I hope it would be 0, but it's 13% as a back office function. So what I see here is some good news, but also some opportunities as well. So we want to get this exceptionally valuable. So I think we're on the journey from little value to exceptionally valuable. So Hub supporting many key objectives. And as I mentioned, what's really amazing, if you've never gone into the weeds, or the amount of departments that the processing and invoice touches, from treasury to on the way in, so your accounting staff. So it touches a lot of folks. And then again, on the procurement side and the manufacturing side, those supplier relationships are critical to success, even more so in today's world. So let's talk a little bit about why accounts payable, why now. I think this is important to give us some context here. And those of you who are CFOs and directors of finance, hopefully this this will bring justification to you for attending the webinar. So what's going on with accounts payable? My personal experience, I've been speaking in Treasury and Finance for the past 10 years, and I've probably spoken on this topic 10 to 15 times over the last 12 months. And it's great to see, just because it's such an area of great opportunity for companies to impact the bottom line and also impact that productivity. So why are we seeing this? Real-time data for better cash management obviously has become a priority for CFOs. So now that we have all this, what we call big data, overused word, but we have this data and we have this technology that is available to companies of all sizes. That's giving us visibility into items. And so it's kind of like you're peeling back an onion. So once you peel another layer, you find more and more opportunities. So if you get visibility into those cash flows, inflows and outflows, what we're seeing more and more from companies and from CFOs is a focus on owning that cash conversion cycle. For those of us who are in Treasury, have Treasury backgrounds, we were often more focused on the accounts receivable side. But what we've seen, especially in the past couple of years, companies of all sizes, tremendous opportunities on the accounts payable side, efficiencies from onboarding suppliers, optimizing the procure-to-pay process, and on the back end of that, optimizing the payments side of it, optimizing our payments portfolio, how we're paying our customers, the cost there as well. Another reason, we'll review a few results from the 2017 AFP Payments Fraud and Control Study. Payments fraud is still rampant. So one of the things the AP automation does is it helps us mitigate some of those risk exposures. And you better have your seatbelt on, because some of these statistics are pretty scary on the payments fraud front. The fraudsters do not discriminate by company size or payments type. Of course, why AP, why now? Of course, we're starting to see this. Common knowledge, but I think we're starting to see more focus on the cost effectiveness of this automation. Manual-based paper processes consume time, space, and money, and we'll talk about how much time, space, and money. And then I think, as I mentioned earlier, companies are starting to realize the strategic value of improving these supplier relationships. So one of the blind spots that many companies have in terms of AP is on the discount side. Some companies don't even know they have discounts. Are they taking them? Are there opportunities to offer dynamic discounting? So what we've seen over the past, I would say, 2 years, we've seen companies holding on to cash. I mean, I've seen some studies that say the enterprise companies are holding on to cash for 90 days. Well, I think that's a bad approach to take. What you should be doing is seeing if you can use that use that cash and use some dynamic discount in order to improve your cash conversion cycle. And then finally, the right technology is affordable to any business size, and it's very cost effective. So these solutions and the technology and the functionality is incredibly powerful. And like I said, most of my Treasury experience was back in the early 2000s, and it's amazing to me how far we've come. I wish I would have had this opportunity. So I love this slide. So I think this really puts a point on what I was saying on owning that cash conversion cycle. So for Treasury, we've always been focused on receiving cash, finished goods. But if we look at the other side of it, what's our efficiency? What's our cost in terms of ordering product, receiving product, processing invoices, paying for products? So we look at that whole cycle. Some of what this visibility does is it gives us the ability to benchmark how long is it taking us to process an invoice in addition to that cost. Some companies have an inherent barrier to even taking discounts just because of the time it takes them to process those invoices. And what we'll see, the root causes of some of these inefficiencies and pain points are pretty easy to take away when you combine the right technology process. And again, it's important to note that the business case, it makes sense for companies of all sizes. So there is some sort of threshold on number of invoices, but that's pretty low. But it also matters the dollar amount of the invoices that you're processing. So I would say the AP automation business case is a good fit for companies of almost any size. So we talked a little bit about discounting and dynamic discounting. And so I would say that almost always it makes sense to take that discount. And if you have cash and it makes sense, we'll look at that opportunity cost of cash. It often makes sense to negotiate those discounts as well. So a really quick example. I have to rush this pretty quickly due to time, but if you want to print this out, I'm happy to talk with anyone after it. So let's just take a look at this. What are our terms? Let's say we're offered 110 net 30. We receive a 1% discount off the invoice. Top price if payment is received within 10 days. So I do a little calculation of the effective interest rate. So 18.1%, that's the opportunity of cost of not taking that discount. So unless our cost of borrowing is 18% or more, which I hope none of you have, it makes sense for us to take that discount. And this also brings up the point which I said earlier about that dynamic discounting. So you want to look at that, the ROI to you in terms of negotiating those discounts. We're also starting to see more value placed on the accuracy of forecasting cash flows. So as we get that visibility into accounts payable, especially if we are a net borrower and especially if we have foreign exchange exposures, it helps us optimize how we use our cash. And then also what we're starting to see is the value in leveraging electronic payments as we get that visibility. As you look at that accounts payable process, let's minimize the cost, and that includes the cost of our payments. So what companies should all ask themselves, if you're writing checks, you should ask yourself why. I used to work in manufacturing. We used to write checks because there were some guys in our plant who didn't want their wives seeing their paychecks, but I hope those days are gone. And then some of the AP automation suppliers will actually help you negotiate with your suppliers to get them on those electronic payments. And a big inherent barrier used to be that remittance information, but now there are ways to transmit that information. So that has really removed that inherent barrier. So let's talk a little bit more about why AP, why now. Again, I encourage you to read the 2000 AFP Payments Fraud and Control Survey. There's no other way to say it. Payments fraud is rampant. 74% of companies across the board experienced attempted or actual payments fraud in 2016, and you'll see that, so it's 71% at the low end, less than $1 billion. But you'll see, I think one of the underlying reasons here is that fraudsters realize that companies of all sizes, the AP area is strapped, and there's a lot of manual processes that still go on. So they know those weak points, and a lot of times those weak points are the same regardless of the company size. And then let's take a look. I also said they don't discriminate by payments type. So we still see checks as the top target, and we see wire transfers creeping up. But you still look at that difference, even between 75% and 46%. So this screams to me, why do I write checks? So I hope that screams to you as well. The same thing, but also as far as the trends go, some of the momentum on the wire transfers is due to BEC scams. But the point of this is that one of the reasons to motivate you to look at AP and AP automation, your processes, is how to mitigate those risks, and automation is a way to bring that visibility and establish those controls. So let's talk about some supplier management pain points. So I'll give you my entertaining visual points, and then we'll back things up with some survey results as well. So just in terms of improving the supplier relationships, what are some of the pain points that we have if we use manual processes, disparate systems, and we have people all across the board dealing with our suppliers, and we have no visibility in our interaction with these suppliers? Well, I mentioned the first one, lack of visibility. We can have untimely communication with our suppliers, so that causes tension. In terms of finance professionals, when I was in finance, the only time we talked to our suppliers was when there was an issue. So in finance, we should endeavor to engage our suppliers throughout the supplier life cycle. So I would encourage you CFOs out there and finance leaders out there to really make an effort to engage with your suppliers. And it doesn't have to be with the people that are involved on their side of it, the payment side, but maybe engage with their CFOs and build those relationships, especially if you're in manufacturing. If there's an issue where an issue comes up, you have an issue, you have a supply chain issue, you have an order you need to rush, what's going to happen if your supplier management system is not right, or there's some issue going on you don't know about, they're not going to be on board. So you have to offer value to your suppliers. Again, lack of visibility in systems can create collaboration barriers, relationships constraints, and I think this is where AP automation can do, any companies of any size as well, let's be proactive instead of reactive in terms of supplier relationship management. So there's been this big focus on CRM, customer lifecycle. I think now we have the opportunity to really leverage AP automation and technology to do supplier relationship lifecycle management. So taking that a step further, on the payment side, so we talked about it's really AP side as well as the payment side. We have discounts lost. So we have our friend here who doesn't have visibility into his discounts, so he doesn't realize he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So his effective interest rate was 18.1%. He should absolutely be taking those discounts, but if he doesn't have visibility, he can't really negotiate those discounts anyway. We talked about what happens if you don't have good cash forecasting. That leads to ineffective working capital management. When I worked in Treasury, when I was hit with big chunks of accounts payable that I didn't know were going to come through, didn't have that forecast, well, that was obviously inefficient. If I was a net borrower, that could have made me borrow money when I didn't need to and pay interest, right? So that's one thing that happened. Also, if I don't have visibility in terms of the AP spend and all the currency exposures that I have, I might go out and buy currency at the wrong time. I might not need currency, so I might need to convert that back. So those are two areas where ineffective working capital management can come in. We talked about costly payment methods, and we can also have cumbersome controls. So let's take a look at these AP pain points. A great survey from PayStream Advisors in 2017, and just a real quick word on the demographics. This survey information came from 300 back office industries across a wide variety of industries and demographics. So some powerful information from the people that really deal with the AP processing of issues. So what are the top challenges? Manual routing of invoices for approval. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Automation, the manual routing really disrupts the workflow, increases the time it takes to process an invoice. And of course, that was one of our top concerns of your management in the initial survey question. Manual data, majority of invoices are treated in paper format. That just means that we're missing opportunities to optimize that workflow. Lack of visibility, outstanding liability items. So these are just some of the top challenges that I mentioned in the pain points here. Again, I would encourage you to read the report from PayStream Advisors, to benchmark, use this to help build your business case. If you're not in the weeds in accounts payable, you don't own accounts payable, you might want to print out this slide and go to your folks and say, hey, take a look at this survey and webinar. It's pretty interesting. If I were to ask you, what are the top challenges that you face, and then what can we do about it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take a little breather here. I'm going to launch our next polling question. It's going to tee up the rest of our content. But here, I mentioned this earlier. So I'm asking you to share with me how much it costs you to process an invoice. So again, one of the things that we want to focus on, a great benchmark for us in terms of our AP process efficiency, is the cost of that invoice, right? The cost and the time. So the first step is you really need to understand how much it costs you to process an invoice. And that's something, if you haven't done, you need to make that investment in that. So I would encourage you, if you haven't done that, it looks like almost half the folks on the call have not done that. So if you're in accounts payable, get your team together, map out the processes. If you're a publicly traded company, you can look at those Sarbanes-Oxley documents, but you really need to sit down and understand how much that cost is in terms of all the time that's involved when it takes to process that invoice. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question here in a couple seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and share those results. And as I mentioned, a big majority, so 49% of you, I don't know, but okay, we can fix that. So I think the 49% of you that don't know, once you figure that out, you're going to be very motivated to go out and see what AP automation could do for your companies. 13%, I applaud you. 10% or less, that's definitely best in class. 24% between 10 and 20, then 8% between 20 and 30. Obviously, there could be some industry factors that are contributing here, but I just wanted to give us a baseline. So I've seen numbers all over the board here. I've seen $30, and so here's a survey with some results from Ardent Partners, which tells us it's $15.55 to pay a single invoice. So those of you who don't really know what it was, so if I told you, $15 or $30, you would probably your eyes would probably pop out of your eye sockets. But if you start to look at all the people and processes that are involved, that number is, you start to see where these costs are coming from, and then it starts. The root causes of the costs really seem to really scream out to you. And again, a lot of those are just on the automation side, the workflow side. So you look at the inefficiency. So 15.55% just on the paying side. We also talked about the time. Look at that, 28.5 days from invoice receipt to pay. How many discounts are we going to be able to get when we do that? So obviously that number is a little bit frightening. But if you look at AP automation, some of the survey results, average savings. So we can take that cost 15.55 down by 80%. How many invoices do you process every week? So to cut a check, so let's move to electronic payment. That takes that cost down 60%. 28.5%, we can take that down 80%. That'll give us flexibility in dynamic discount and the supplier relationships. Also, inefficiencies in the whole AP process, time spent handling supplier calls. It's amazing how much time is spent there. We talked about missing discounts, duplicate payments. So again, this helps you build that business case, and what's compelling is to see what AP automation can do in order to relieve those pain points, and it's easy to see how that impacts the bottom line. So again, let's dig a little deeper. I'm digging a little deeper here because this was just a little bit mind blowing to me. If you look at how much time resolving AP process issues, so look at this data: 1 to 3 hours per week, 36% of the folks surveyed; 4 to 8 hours per week, 35%. 4 to 8 hours a week. If you put the cost on that, again, this business case just screams out to you. If you spend 9 to 20 hours a week, how many people do you have processing invoices? Let's say you have 10 people, right? They spend 4 hours. That's 40 hours. That's a whole nother person. What could you do with the whole employee without having to go to HR? So of course, some people want to look at headcount, but I like to position it more as what are we looking at in terms of the productivity? What can we unlock on that side? So now let's pivot a little bit to cure some of these headaches. We touched on automation a little bit. So let's take a look at some more survey data. So let's look at some of those top priorities. Again, this was one of our earlier polling question. We want to reduce invoice processing costs. That aligns with our polling question. P2P processing systems, improving reporting and analytics. That gives us the visibility that we need. Communication, collaboration. So again, just great survey results, great information, great way for you to benchmark, and then a great way to start that conversation, right? If you're the CFO and you want to know what's going on in AP and how you can help them become better and more valuable to your company, these are great conversation starters in terms of some of these survey results that you may want to share. Accounts payable success. So let's look at, we're talking about all the problems. Let's talk about some of the success. So how are we realizing this? They want smart systems, more agile analytics and reporting. Of course, executive support is also important. So what is it that would drive the AP success? Again, in the last one, 41% is going to be that manual process. So what we're saying here on the slide is it's going to be a combination of people, process, and technology, right? That's my little note on keeping it simple. So we need the technology, but we need to know how to use the technology. So it doesn't matter if we have a Porsche and it's a stick and we don't know how to drive a stick, and we need to be able to leverage the analytics that we have, but we also have to have the right processes in place, but we also have the right people in place who understand how to leverage the technology, get those controls set up. How do we leverage the technology to automate our workflow? And that workflow also includes our processing of exception items as well. So I love this slide from my webinar partner. Used a great slide. So how it should work. So this is kind of like, I would say, the cat's meow, and you should compare this to how things work at your company. Right now, you want those electronic documents. You capture those documents. At the top, what are we looking at? No touch, straight through processing. That eliminates a lot of the pain points that we talked about. Enter, workflow, approve, pay, export. You can see some of the other things that we'll see here. On the accounting side, how much time do we spend making journal entries that we can automate those journal entries. We can automate some of those controls. So this is another slide that I would print out. So another thing is that we can take the information, export it to your financial systems, your ERP, other systems. Helps us manage our supplier relationship. So again, I love this: capture, enter, approve, pay, export. And I would suggest that you print the slide and just say, okay, how do we get our invoices and what happens? What's the accounting side? What's our workflow? What are the manual places? What are the number of systems that we have involved? We may need to have multiple systems involved, but what is the integrability between those systems? So that's the other thing you want to look at in terms of AP automation. Here's another representation of the same slide. So I don't want to spend too much time in this, but this really speaks to me into how much is going on here, right? So as a treasury manager, I wasn't really in tune to all this, and those of you who are CFOs, a little bit bigger companies, you might not realize that all these things are going on. The cool thing to me is that all these areas are going to offer areas of opportunity for you, and you can see how we do this. And some of the places where I've seen advances in the AP automation technology is just in the PO matching, and I never really understood how complicated that was, even though I was in manufacturing. So on the left side, these are some of the problems that I have. How do we overcome those? Scan, smart doc recognition, whether it's OCR or AI, mobile approval, right? We need to keep things moving through the system, and so this is another slide that I would print out. So again, it's like where you are, where are you, where do you want to go, and then how are you going to get there? And I always try and couch things in terms of people, process, and technology. And then, of course, you have to make the business case where you need to fill gaps in each of those areas. So those of you who are a little less visual, so here's key characteristics to look for if you're going on the path to AP automation. You want to look for an end-to-end solution, supports the entire process, automate it. You want to mitigate data entry and mitigate user interaction. Of course, you need to have controls, separation of duties, but we want to mitigate that. We want to have seamless, if possible, integrates with your existing ERP system. Of course, it's nice if it's quick to implement. It doesn't take us years to implement. Many of these solutions can implement in weeks or even a few months, but that depends on how much work you do up front. So if you do the work up front, do it right, then you're going to be able to realize that ROI more quickly. Of course, you want it to be intuitive, and a lot of the providers in the space do a great job on training, and some of it is just when I worked with my AP colleagues, some of them were a little bit averse to change, but once you show them how much easier their life is going to be, the light bulb's going to go off, and they're going to be begging for you to really engage in the AP automation project. Of course, security, and then collaborative. This is one of my main points. You want that visibility. You want to have that visibility that's going to empower you to improve relationships with vendors and teamworks. Some of the softwares out there allow these chat features, so you can really see what's going on in real time. You can also see bottlenecks if you're looking at that time to process, and you can also start to benchmark costs at every area of the process as well. So I'm going to go ahead and break things up a little bit, and let's get your feedback. And so next polling question is asking you, where's your company at in the process of automating your accounts payable function? So I want to remind everyone that I can still take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Of course, I appreciate everyone's consideration in taking the survey. Those of you who are interested in the CTP credits, you will need to answer all of our polling questions. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so, and then we're going to transition a little bit, and we're going to talk about the strategic outcomes of AP automation. We're going to start to talk about how to define what that ROI would look like at your company, and then we'll transition into how to construct and communicate the effective business case at your company. So on the business case side, two things that I want to, there's two constituencies you need to engage. One is the person who has to approve the spend. Even if you're the CFO, the CEO may still need to approve your spend. So who's got the pocket strings, but also who is involved in your project, right? So everyone whose life you're going to impact, you need to get them involved as well. So you want to engage both of those constituencies and have both of them on board. So let's go ahead and transition to and look at these AP automation outcomes. So again, we'll start to look at the PayStream Advisors 2017 surveys. So we talked about all these great things that we can see through AP automation. So let's just take a look at some of the top things that companies are realizing. Quicker approval of invoices, which is awesome. That mitigates that time, right? That was our top concern on our survey. Increase employee productivity. I'd like to see all these numbers higher. I'll say that, but this to me, it really speaks to that strategic value, right? Increased employee productivity, and you can actually start to put numbers and metrics around that. So all of these can be components of that business case. So almost at a company of any size, what you're going to see if you invest in AP automation, you're going to see quicker approval invoices, you're going to see increased employee productivity, you're going to get that visibility, you're going to lower your processing costs. So all these build the foundation of that business case, and of course help us define those metrics and show what the value is. How much more quickly are we going to process our invoices? And some of these, once we establish a benchmark, what that does is that creates an environment of continuous improvement. So let's take a look at what we'll call just best in class, those that leverage the technology, are on the cutting edge, versus, let's say, all others who don't fall into this class. Again, survey data from Ardent Partners. So this can really open some eyeballs, and really kind of, if you're the CFO, this speaks to you. If you're not the CFO, this is another slide that might help you make your business case to your CFO and get his or her attention. So again, we talked about cost to process an invoice, $15 or more. What's best in class? $274. $12 an invoice. How many invoices do you process? Time to process a single invoice, 12 days to 3.5 days. Boy, does that give us some power to work with our suppliers if we can turn that invoice in 3 or 4 days. The invoice exception rate, again, that just causes things to go out of the system. I would expect to see a little more difference there, but obviously we want to automate that process. Invoice exceptions, what does that cause us to be on the phone? And that's not a good use of our time. Straight through process, obviously best in class, have that straight through. Representative suppliers, again, we want those electronic documents. So a few slides ago, I showed you what does that end-to-end automation look like, and then what this slide does, it says this is what you get for investing in that AP automation. So these are the fruits of that investment that you're going to make. Again, that helps us outline that business case. Just some more data, just puts a fine point on it. Again, some great information offered by our webinar sponsor. Just a point, many great resources out there, the survey studies, but I also encourage you to go out to the Use website and see what they have to offer in terms of their resources. There's a lot of great information there. So again, we look at the before after. We go from 1555 to 320. We're looking at a small to medium businesses processing 500 invoices per month, and this is just on the cost side. $74,000. Wow. That's pretty eye-opening. So your cost per invoice may be $20, maybe $30, maybe $50, and I would say that after automation, that number is still going to stay close to that $3, $5, under the $10. So this is just a good slide to take a look and say this really brings home how much that difference can be. So, and then this is another resource that I love. I encourage you to go here, and it just gives you a very high level your annual savings on the number of invoices you have per month. So this is a great resource, but it also does what it also does is it shows you, okay, you might be at 750. What happens if you do an acquisition? You go to 1,500, you go to 3,000, and this allows you the ability to go to do that sensitivity analysis and say, I know we're looking at growing by 20%. This is what happens here. So I have a question. I'm going to go ahead and break up the content a little bit. So a very good point, a very good question in terms of the solutions that we're looking at here in terms of AP automation. A lot of the solutions in the space are cloud-based, which means that we really don't need that much time and investment from IT. we definitely want them to know what's going on, and we want to look at the integrability between our AP automation solution and our ERP systems. But the leading edge AP automation solutions already have experience in integrating with their ERP systems. A lot of them have APIs. So I would say the tension, as soon as you educate your IT folks and get your IT folks involved as much as they want to be. But the good news is about cloud applications is we in finance can take more ownership of everything, right? The application, the training, and then that integrability as well. Again, there's a lot of experience out there. There's a lot of APIs. A lot of companies will work with you and manage that data transfer that needs to go back and forth. And again, there's a lot of resources out there that talk about the integrability issues. But again, there's some good on-premise systems, but the cloud AP automation solutions the cloud solutions in general were built to communicate with each other. Some of the older systems, ERP systems, legacy systems, were built not to communicate with other systems, not to move data back and forth. But that's what the beauty is of all these automation solutions. So what I would do is I would take a look at the solution providers out there and see what ERP system you have. But most of the top providers have experience, and if not, they're willing to work with you and move that data back and forth, because that's really part of what it's all about. So let's start to look at the ROI of AP automation, just to dig in a little bit more on some of the components which you previously discussed. Part of it, you want to estimate the cost savings. Efficiency, one of the things we talked about. Obviously, the time is saved by each person impacted by AP automation. So the sum of the hours for each employee impacted. So how much time did it used to spend? It used to take John 5 hours, or this is exaggerated, 5 hours. Now it takes him 3 hours. How much do we pay him an hour? Boom, right there. This is the one that I think people really need to focus on. I think they miss a little bit. What's it worth to have an employee impacted work on more strategic projects? So John is not spending 10 hours on the phone. So John is now spending 10 hours looking at discounts. How do we put a value on that? What is that productivity factor? 10 hours times, I don't know, the additional value that we get out of John, maybe additional $1, $5, $20. It could be hundreds of dollars. If you look at the discounts that you're missing, some of the companies that we might have on the call, you will be floored with the amount of value that you can extract and negotiate on the dynamic discounting side. And then related, I just said discount efficiency. Again, what is the value of taking discounts that wouldn't have been visible or possible? So again, we need to look at the opportunity cost of capital. So these are giving us the building blocks for the ROI of AP automation for your company, and these are obviously going to be a key component in building that business case. This is another one of my favorite summary slides, strategic outcomes of AP automation. Again, some of the stuff you may think is a little repetitive. Well, there's a reason for that. So I want to keep making this point. Companies of all sizes, that business case, look at your company, look at your process, where you're at, look at what's out there, what we've shown you, where you can go, and then print the slides out and look at all the pillars of your business case. So what are some of the strategic outcomes? Duplicate payment of invoices. Believe me, it happens more than you would think. You eliminate suboptimal payment methods. Again, we might want to look at, let's get off checks if we can, improving our supplier relationships, discounts. If we're losing manual processes, errors, we're mitigating payments fraud risk exposures, we're improving internal controls, audit trails, transparency, visibility, culture of continuous improvement. Priceless allows more employee focus on strategic activities. Priceless, again, our CFOs, a modern CFO's priority. Absolutely, accounts payable, right? Of course, we're going to save costs, impact the bottom line, but we're going to improve our supplier relationships. In today's world, our suppliers often become our business partners. Also, I'm impacting productivity across the enterprise. When you see how many people are involved in an AP process, from accounting itself, general accounting, general ledgers, AP, treasury, you will be amazed. Impact productivity across the enterprise. All CFOs love that. Some research data to back up some of the points I just made. Strategic outcomes, better. Forecast, budgeting, planning, again. Optimizing working capital. Handling invoice exceptions, again. probably eliminating those, improving collaboration, better payment strategies, enhancing supplier relationship. These are all the components of your business case. Again, when you're making that business case, these all add possible components when you're building up that business case. So let's talk about that business case. So I have my little slides here, 10 steps for an effective AP automation case. There's two parts to it, right? You need to build that case. You need to be able to communicate that business case in written form, but you also need to be able to communicate it in person. And when you're communicating that business case, I would strongly urge you to consider your constituency is not only who you need to win approval from, but also those that are involved in that process. And when you're putting that business case together, all of us have people that are Mr. No or Mrs. No that are going to be the biggest people that are going to try and throw a wrench in our AP automation project. Guess what? You go to those people right from the start and engage them. Turn those people into your biggest evangelists. Believe me, it works. I've done it before. Take someone out to lunch. Just sit by them and figure out exactly what they do so you get them on board. And those will be your biggest evangelists, because I've seen this happen before. The CFO comes in the meeting. He knows who's going to be the biggest opponent in accounting, and let's say it's Joe. Hey, Joe, what do you think about this? Guess what? If you didn't involve Joe in building the business case, you are about to get torpedoed, and your project is over right there, people. So you want to have Joe on board. And how cool is it going to be if Joe says, yeah, John and I talked about this. This is fantastic. It's going to help my team. Then the CFO is he's probably going to be surprised. If you're the CFO, you're probably thinking, that'd surprise you a little bit. So that is critical. So the steps, you want to establish the key pain points. So we talked about pain points on multiple slides: discounts lost, costs, cumbersome controls, lack of visibility, manual inputs, ineffective working capital management. Again, look at these, which are company specific to you. And then another point to make is, what is the cost of us to continue to process accounts payable the way we do now? So it's going to cost us. Create that sense of urgency. You need to define the lay of the land. It need to be addressed. Again, I talked about this. People, process, technology. People, we might need people to change what they do, but it's probably going to make them more productive. Do we need to change processes? I hope so. Let's make these processes more efficient. Let's take steps out of the process. In technology, what technology do we need? What technology we might be able to remove from the process? We might be able to remove Excel. We might be able to remove ERP modules. So another point that I'll make is, I've seen companies try and force AP best practices through their ERPs, and in most cases, it just doesn't work. ERPs were not designed for AP automation excellence. So I would encourage you to look at how to use your ERP in conjunction with an AP automation solution. So trying to program your ERP and spend time on that side is just not worth the effort. So it can be done much easier and at a much lower cost. You want to offer multiple solutions to show you've done your homework. You don't want to show vendor bias. So you want to present multiple potential vendors and levels of automation. Of course, I'll caution you on the levels of automation. From my experience, what I've seen, it makes sense to go all in, or as far as you can go in terms of the level of automation. It's worth it. You want to have that cost-benefit analysis on those defensible assumptions, numbers. You want to include impacts on the bottom line, and these are things you want to make sure that you have. We talked about hard dollar cost savings, time savings, productivity impacts, more time spent on high value adding activities. Again, some of these things you can say it's like Christmas, the gift that keeps on giving every single month. You want to have an executive summary that delivers the urgency, issues, how it's going to be done, and the benefits. And again, cost of inaction. We talked about this a few times. You got to know your constituency, and when you're presenting your business case, you have to present with confidence and passion. Especially those of you who aren't CFOs. If you're going to the CFO, you better go in there with your confidence and passion. Because let me tell you something. If you go into the CFO's office and say, I want you to invest money in AP automation, he's probably going to give you a little bit of a funny look. Hopefully not anymore, but back in my day, that would have been. So you better go in there with confidence and passion, and look at all the things we've talked about. It's almost a no-brainer for most companies. You want to clearly define the project roles, responsibilities, and accountability for each stakeholder at the meeting. So what you want to do is, those who are going to be involved in the implementation of your project to make it successful, we want to see if we establish that accountability. So we want to put benchmarks. Maybe it might be
how fast the process moves from point A to point B, and so there's some metrics around that. How do we improve those things? And you need to clearly define how all the project pieces fit together and the role that each vested party plays in successful project execution. So again, this goes up to that upfront work and engaging your constituency. So I would suggest, if you're the project owner, you have a meeting with everyone that's going to be involved, everyone who touches documents, who receives documents, through email, everyone in Treasury. So let's get everybody in the room. And then one thing that allows us to do is let's level set. Let's talk to these folks before we start making that business case. What are your pain points? And you can start the conversation with, hey, I was on this webinar. I saw all these pain points. How does that compare with things in here? So get them engaged, and then they'll get excited about the project, and they'll start to make suggestions. And then you can start to see how all the pieces fit together and establish that accountability by everyone in the room that impacts the cost and the time of that accounts payable being taken care of. And maybe most importantly, define success, measure it, and communicate it. You need to define what success looks like. Just because you win that investment approval, you need to continue to communicate that success. Continue to measure it. Don't be satisfied if you made an impact. We lowered invoice processing time from 28 days to 15 days. That's not good enough. How do we get to 10? How do we get to 5? And then communicate it. Let's have those benchmarks. Let's take a look at those benchmarks. Let's tie accounts payable efficiency to our company goals, impacting our bottom line. So what do you need? Metrics, benchmarks, and you need to establish and maintain that accountability. So again, the key to winning that investment in that AP automation. So let's circle back before we pivot onto our Q&A. I like to go back and do my learning objectives. So this was my promise to you in spending your valuable time with me today. I hope you are all alert and awake, and that I made you smile at least once today. Understand why AP is a key strategic function. We spent a lot of time there. So we talked about few of the driving factors besides lowering cost. Improving productivity of all those involved in the AP process, improving those supplier relationships. Again, that increased focus on all parts of that cash conversion cycle. We talked about wanting you to be able to identify opportunities to improve the value of AP function at your company. So again, we gave you slides and slides of information and data about all the pain points that you may be experiencing in your company, and looking at that AP process end to end, all the way from supplier onboarding to the way that you're making those payments. We talked about how you can quantify those improvements in accounts payable, and then we gave you some specific advice on how to construct and communicate that effective business case. Again, on that side of it, I would suggest you consider printing out those slides as you're putting that business case together. In my experience in Treasury and talking with thousands of Treasury professionals and CFOs over the past 5 to 10 years, is a lot of times the project will be lost because of the ineffective communication of that business case. So I also have a slide in here that offers you some additional resources. Of course, I wasn't able to tell each and every one of you how to exactly optimize accounts payable at your company. However, I think I've given you the right information to ask the right questions, engage the people that you need to engage, and have the motivation to go out and do research in terms of some potential AP automation solution providers. And then another thing would be, even if you're using a web-based AP automation solution, you need to make sure that you're optimizing the functionality that's available in that solution as well. So print out 1 or 2 of those slides that I'm saying all these benefits you should be realizing, and touch base with your provider to make sure that you're unlocking all that value. Some additional resources: 2017 Payments Fraud and Control Survey, PayStream Advisors, Ardent Partners. Again, great ways to benchmark, great way to start conversations within and across accounts payable. Invoice workflow automation, automating end-to-end accounts payable for the middle market. And this white paper, I think, is informative, very entertaining. The Uberization of AP. And then, of course, I talked about several resources on the used websites. One of my favorite ones is that cost savings calculator. So again, I encourage you to do that additional research. Also encourage you to engage your fellow accounts payable professionals, treasury professionals. Reach out to those folks. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That is a great way to do that. Attend conferences, LinkedIn groups, treasury groups, AP LinkedIn groups. There's Institute of Financial Management, AP P2P. So if there is a way for you to connect with the person that's been in your seat that can give you that great knowledge. Of course, you can talk to your providers as well. They have great thought leadership as well, but don't feel like that you're stuck. There's a lot of information out there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have time for a few questions. So again, we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. If I don't get to your questions, I will be happy to follow up with you after the webinar is over. So first question is around the kind of the tipping point. So is there a company, is there a number of invoices that I need to process? And I think I touched this earlier, but the answer to that is no. So what you need to do, some of it is about the level, almost a level of inefficiency that you have between where you're at and where you could be. The first step is going to be really understanding how much it costs you to process an invoice. And obviously that's key, but also the time as well. So you need to know both of those components as those are key. So the hurdle is relatively low on that side. And again, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily the number of invoices. It can also be the amount of those invoices, especially if we're looking at some dynamic discounting and some value on that side. So you want to definitely be focused in those areas. Another couple questions. Couple questions. These are focused around how do you engage your constituency. So how do you engage people? Specific tactics. So for me, a couple things that I'll mention. One is taking people out to lunch or having a meeting that involves food. If you have a meeting that involves food, then people will come. So you might want to just tee things up about, hey, let's try this. Say, hey, I was just on this webinar about AP automation, and I just wanted to kind of review some of the high points with everyone. I'm going to bring food in, and then you can get everyone in the room and start to have those conversations. The other thing that you can do, if you're not in accounts payable, start going to the accounts payable area and just doing a walk by. At first, they might be a little afraid of the CFO and the finance people, but as soon as you walk around, take people's pulse, just have that interest, right, in what they're doing, and then they'll have an interest in what you're doing as well. So you really have to build those relationships. Once you build those relationships, people will want to be involved in your business case. They will be accountable. And so that would be my advice on that front. And then the final question before my closing comments is just where do I get started? I think I've mentioned this many times, but happy to answer the question. Is you need to understand how much it costs you to process an invoice, how much it costs, who's involved, people, process, technology. You really need to have that baseline and then talk to all the people that are involved in the process, get their pain points, and you'll be amazed how that business case it really starts to make itself. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as I make a few closing comments here. So First, I'd like to once again thank our webinar sponsor, Use. We appreciate and share their commitment to thought leadership, which is also evident in the great content and resources they offer, which you can review on the Use website. Please note you'll have the opportunity to learn more about how Use delivers world-class AP automation via our post-webinar survey, which will launch immediately following the webinar. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave our polling question up for another 5 seconds or so. So please, if you need to answer that polling question, we appreciate your consideration in taking the polling question. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that polling question up for another 5 seconds. Okay, so the top answer there was focused on the ROI, which I think we spent a lot of time on in the business case. And finally, I would like to thank you, the audience, for your valuable time. If you have any questions about the content we covered during the webinar or about Treasury Careers, CTP credit, please contact me at Ernie@treasuryjobs.com. Thank you very much, everyone, and make the rest of your day great.